Live the Goals Podcast, your place for motivation, life lessons, and laughter. Don't settle for wandering through a mundane life. Instead, let us help you reach your goals and live a fulfilling life doing what you love. Our guests know what it's like to live with purpose and laugh along the way. Warning, if you're a stick in the mud, you definitely need to stick around. Loosen up your ties, kick off your high heels, and let's get to it with your host, Dale Richardson.
All right, friends and family, welcome back to another episode of Live the Goals Podcast. This is an interview episode, so excited to bring our guest to you. But before I introduce them, let me just make sure you know that today's episode is brought to you by Audible. Audible is, I'm new with this, friends and family, so I feel like I'm on like the radio or something. But I love Audible because I don't have the time to sit down with books as much as I would like to. But I don't have to give up listening to books. And so I listen to books on the go with Audible. You get a free month as well as a free book as a Live the Goals podcast listener by just going to livethegoals.com/audible. And now, since he has been sitting there patiently through my commercial, I'm going to introduce our guest for today. It is Mike Bundrant, and he is a featured blogger on the world's top mental health website, psychcentral.com, which gets 7 million visitors monthly. That's pretty nuts. Now, Mike is an NLP master practitioner, a retired psychotherapist, and the founder of NLP Center, which is the future of NLP training. So, Mike, are you ready to help us set and reach goals that matter?
Dale, there's nothing else I'd rather do. And
yes.
Just glad you invited me on. Great to be here.
Thank you so much, Mike. Excited for you to be here as well. So I've given them just a really quick snapshot of who you are, but I'd love for you to share a little bit more and let our friends and family know more about who you are.
Sure. I live in Southern California near San Diego. My background is psychology and mental health. I was a licensed mental health counselor in Albuquerque and Santa Fe, New Mexico, for many years. Ultimately, I left the mental health system because I not a good fit for it. Let's just say that. Mm-hmm. And but at some point along the way, early in my career, I learned NLP, which is Neuro-Linguistic Programming, and I wanted to teach it. So I went up through the ranks and became a trainer. Started teaching NLP. Then in 2011. We decided to put all of our courses online and teach people through a combination of online learning and online live interaction. Mm-hmm. And so that was in 2011. Now we have students in 63 countries around the world.
Wow.
We're the leading NLP certification in the online world, and got a great community, and life is good.
Yeah, wow. So I am relatively new to NLP. I've got a good friend. Actually, the first guest I interviewed for Live the Goals podcast. Today's the day that we're recording this. This will come out a few weeks from now, but the day we're recording this is my 1-year anniversary.
Hey,
and so yeah.
Hey, congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you. So 1 year ago today, the guy who introduced me to NLP was the guy I interviewed. And so my knowledge of that is still pretty surface level, but it sounds fantastic. And I'm looking forward to getting more of that information from you and especially how that's going to help us with our goals and trying to live the type of life we want to live. So before we get into that, Mike, I always start my shows by asking my guests to share something funny that happened recently. Whether it was big or small, just something that made you chuckle recently, because I want folks to remember that, hey, good days, bad days, mediocre days, we got to find a way to laugh through life sometimes. And so I'd love for you to share one of those moments.
Sure. Yeah, we laugh a little bit, boost our immune system too.
There you go.
Right? But I tell you what comes to mind was last night, and I'll offer kind of a disclaimer here ahead of time. this is a something political that made me laugh, but I'm bipartisan in it. I'm not favoring one side or the other. I watched Donald Trump's speech before Congress, and there's nothing he said that in particular that made me laugh. I thought it was a good speech. But what made me laugh was how absurd it is to watch our divided political process, where he'd had half the room standing and cheering and half the room stone face, wouldn't budge. And it's sort of like half of Congress, half of the Senate isn't going to support him no matter what. And they're not even open to communicating. And by the same token, he doesn't communicate with them very well either. So it's sort of like, how are we going to get anything done, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if our leaders don't even give each other a chance or aren't able to communicate with each other on a very basic level, such as, I disagree with you something, but I can listen to you and say, you know what, I see your point here, and here's where I differ a little bit, and this is my point. Would you consider? I'm just like the basics of mature communication. And so I'm sitting there laughing, and then after you laugh, you get a little sad about it, right?
Yeah. It's almost like laughing to stop from crying.
Laughing to stop from crying. Right? Laughing as denial.
Right.
Right. But anyways, that sort of struck me.
Yeah.
It was really funny.
And you know, that hits me every time I watch a State of the Union. I've gotten really into politics over the last maybe 2 decades, and it happens with every president, at least in the last maybe 2 decades, right? Maybe it was a little different before I got really into it, but the last 2 decades, doesn't matter what side the president's on, one side of the audience for the State of the Union gets up and it's like the greatest thing ever said, and the other one, like you said, they're sitting there stone-faced. Yeah.
I don't know. There's a lot to it, but my fantasy, if I were president, is I'd put together a cabinet and staff and everything that was just a balance between the parties and additional parties. I get everybody with opposing views in a room and say, we're not leaving until we all agree, and there's no criticism, no stonewalling, no nothing. I mean, why can't we work together? But that's a lot when you're listening to somebody up there speaking that diametrically opposes your worldview.
Yeah.
And you got to go, okay, if I'm going to get something done, I have to work with that. And you do have to. I mean, it's a big hurdle to overcome, but still, you know, these are the leaders of our country. Anyways, there you have it.
Yeah, and so thank you. I appreciate you sharing that. And like you said, I think that is something that people can appreciate regardless of what side of the fence they're on politically. Because it's happened for presidents regardless of whether they were Democrat or Republican. And so
and you know what? It happens in my house every day, right? You're in a relationship. I'm married. She's sometimes my wife has a completely different point of view. She's my partner in life. And sometimes our wants and desires and needs and opinions differ wildly. Yet we got to operate as a team. And so you have to work with that. You got to overcome it. It's one of the realities of life. So it actually applies to everybody, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's the perfect segue as well into the topic of goals, because you know, sometimes you do have different goals from the people that you're tied to, whether it's a relationship, whether it's an organization, whether you work in government. But one of the things that I know comes up for you, and why I was so excited to have you here on Live the Goals podcast, is because I've heard you talk about self-sabotage. And I do a lot of training on goal setting, but I'd love to get some insight from you about this. What is this concept of self-sabotage? Like, I want the goal. I know I want the goal. So what are you even talking about, self-sabotage? What does that even mean? That doesn't make sense.
Yeah. No, it's a great question. It's one of my favorite topics in the world. And just to give you 30 seconds, hopefully, of background, you know, I'm an NLP trainer. I've been an NLP trainer for over 20 years. And to me, in terms of, in NLP, we have a model of goal setting. We call it outcome specification. Very thorough, brilliant model that questions you take yourself through when you're setting a goal. And I worked as in the trenches as a mental health counselor with people using NLP, and I've taught people around the world. And the honest truth is, the strategic interventions, the stuff you do that is supposed to work with people, doesn't always work. You know, I may, if you're my client, and you have you have problems making decisions. Let's say you make impulsive decisions.
Right.
I can help you discover the structure of that decision-making process, help you design a new decision-making process, rehearse that decision-making process until it's installed in your thinking.
Right.
And it would be the perfect solution. And you could go out and use it and no longer make impulsive decisions. Many, a good percentage of people, even though they have the perfect tool, won't use it. They'll go out and continue making impulsive decisions. It's sort of like I set a goal. I know what the goal is. I want to lose weight. I know what weight I want to be. I have the exact diet plan that I know will get me there. I got my exercise plan. I got everything that I know is going to work. And as soon as I start to be somewhat successful, I quit. Some attitude comes over me, you know, screw this, I can do what I want. I don't know. Whatever the case may be, I find a way to justify quitting. So self-sabotage, to me, in terms of your purpose and what we talked about in terms of setting goals and so forth.
Right.
The self-sabotage comes in as a very important factor because it's how you get in your own way. It's more often than not the reason that people abandon their goals, quit, give up, and so forth. It's more important. It's what happens when I got the tools, I know what to do, I'm not doing it. I'm procrastinating. I'm engaged in some sort of self-defeating behavior. I become terrified of being successful. I become terrified of failing so much that I actually fail. So much. It's really, really important to understand how self-sabotage works. So in terms of your point,
right,
which is you go, I know I want this, so what are we talking about self-sabotage? Well, I would say this. Consciously, you want it. Consciously, I want things. At a different level, unconsciously, and there's interesting research that suggests that 95% of our decisions are made unconsciously, and we become aware of them after they're made. We become aware of what we're going to do,
right,
the result of the decision, but in terms of the actual decision-making process that happens beneath the surface. Unconsciously, we don't often want what we think we want consciously. And when our unconscious desires, preferences, programs, or habits conflict with our conscious desires, the unconscious is going to win that war every time. It's just so much more powerful,
right,
and broad than our more limited conscious mind. So that's how you go, how do I want two things at the same time? It's like, well, consciously you want one thing, unconsciously you want another. So consciously, I want to be super fit. I want to lose weight. Unconsciously, it's entirely possible that I don't. In fact, the way that you can discover your unconscious preferences is by observing your behavior. So in the last I'm not talking about myself here, but as an example, in the last 10 years, I've been on 20 diets, and none of them have worked for me, even though, 18 of them could have worked for me. So what's the behavior? The behavior is I start a diet, I sabotage a diet, I find some reason I can't do it. So that behavior is the manifestation of some unconscious program that says, I don't want to lose weight. I want to stay just as I am. And that's what that's the kind of thing that we have to dive into and discover what's going on from a self-sabotage point of view.
Yeah, and it sounds like sometimes, even though consciously it's not something I want, is it, you know, am I getting this right, that maybe subconsciously or unconsciously, I'm comfortable where I am, and so that kind of fights against that change because I'm more comfortable not losing the weight, which it may not be a good example for you, but it might be a good example for me. Maybe I'm more comfortable not losing the weight than to take these actions. Is that, am I hearing that right?
Yeah, in fact, that's a pretty good word to describe it. The principle of comfort. If you look at the animal kingdom, which regardless of how you believe we all came about, we have a lot of similarities to the animal kingdom anyways.
Mm-hmm.
And animals operate on instinct, and it's driven, their whole motivation strategy, if you will, is driven by comfort and discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
When they experience the discomfort of hunger, they go and get food. When they experience the comfort of satiety, they stop eating. When they experience the discomfort of fear, they fight or flight. I mean, comfort and discomfort has so much to do with motivation, much more complex in people.
Right.
The unconscious mind operates so much on habit and familiarity, and with really our safety as a primary driver.
Mm-hmm.
So it just so happens that what's familiar is what's safe, and what's safe is what's comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
So a long pattern of being overweight becomes familiar,
Mm-hmm.
even though consciously you may be miserable.
Mm-hmm.
Unconsciously, if you've been that way for a long time and your pattern of behavior is one of resisting efforts to lose weight, unconsciously it's more familiar. Emotionally speaking, nobody is born and raised and goes from being an infant with no boundaries, no sense of time, no sense of other people,
Mm-hmm.
no sense that, hey, it's normal and okay if you don't get what you want immediately. Be patient. Infants don't have that. Infants don't get what they want immediately. They're enraged. In other words, they go right into negativity. There's no way to grow up and sort of bump into the boundaries of the world, the limitations of the world over and over and over and over again without experiencing negativity.
Mm-hmm.
If your parents were not good parents, it's even worse.
Mm-hmm.
And so negativity, emotional negativity becomes a pattern. We bump into it again and again. And guess what? It becomes familiar.
Mm-hmm.
And again, what's familiar is safe.
Mm.
And so we come to expect negativity, to foresee it, and in a funny kind of way, resist positive outcomes when negativity is more familiar. That's why we can over and over and over again attract a certain type of person into a relationship. It's like I've been in 10 relationships. They're all controlling people that try to control me. I've been in 10 relationships. I always attract the jerks,
Right.
or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And unconsciously, that's the familiar pattern.
Mm.
And even the negative emotions that go along with it feel safer than being loved, accepted, respected, and treated well. I say to people all the time, we would all prefer at a deep level a familiar misery over a foreign happiness.
Wow. A familiar misery over a foreign happiness.
It's happiness. If that's foreign to me, it's going to make me anxious.
Yeah.
It's not going to seem safe because I've never experienced it before. A lot of people have what Nathaniel Branden called happiness anxiety. As soon as they start to get happy and comfortable, and they start getting anxious, like, well, when's the other shoe going to drop? This means something bad's going to happen.
Yeah.
Happiness, it's sort of like we can't tolerate happiness.
Mm.
And so I will tell people, this is going to sound strange, but we need to learn to tolerate happiness.
Wow.
To realize it's safe. to be happy. So all of this familiarity familiarity with the negativity, those patterns, we actually end up unwittingly seeking the very thing that makes us miserable consciously.
Right.
And so it's in direct opposition to the goals, the conscious goals that we want to have. And so I like to teach people, one, the principles, but two, to begin to become aware enough to reverse that pattern. Because if you set a goal and it's a good goal and it's clear and so on and so forth, and you know you're not going to sabotage it, hey, you're free. Go for it. It's just a matter of time, and there may be obstacles in the world and so forth, but you're not going to stop yourself.
Right.
And that's powerful.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
So you talked about kind of that setting yourself free and how we may unconsciously, continue to sabotage ourselves because it feels comfortable and familiar. Here's what came to mind for me where I'm wondering what the tie-in is, right? So I've heard countless stories about people who might want something and they thought, they're trying, but they fail, whether it's self-sabotage or maybe they don't have the skills, but for whatever reason, right now we'll call it self-sabotage, right? They want that something, but they continue to fail over and over and over again. But then they have this event in their life, right? You have that accident. You have the doctor tell you that if you don't stop, you'll die. You have that, that big experience, that just kind of that aha moment that changes your focus. And then it seems like for many people after that point, they're able to avoid that self-sabotage much better than they did previously. What's the tie-in there to what you're talking about here? How does that relate? And if so, how does that relate?
It might relate. And let's put it in perspective. Because I've heard a lot of stories too of people who they had that wake-up call, right? The doctor said, lose the weight, stop smoking, whatever. You'll be dead in 5 years. A lot of people, for a lot of people, that wake-up call is after they get a disease, diabetes, for example, type 2 diabetes anyways, or a death in the family, or a major transition that life has forced upon you.
Right.
And they wake up. And so we can talk about that waking up. But let's also remember that a lot of people don't wake up. In other words, they get the message, you're going to die in 5 years, and they go,
wow,
I'm not going to stop smoking. Okay, but I'm not going to stop smoking. Or I'm not going to, I watched my father after his diabetes diagnosis be a completely non-compliant diabetic patient. And then when it got to the very end, when the doctor gave him the final, we're going to have to amputate your feet, then your legs. I mean, you've got like a year if you want to save your legs.
Right.
Didn't comply.
Wow.
Lost his foot, lost both knees above the legs, was dead 3 months later. And he knew it was coming. And now that was a wake-up call for me, right? Because I was overweight at the time going, hey, I'm next in line here.
Oh, wow.
For this. And there's lots of people who have the wake-up call opportunity, who get the dreadful news, and they don't. And to me, I'm not trying to be negative. I'm just trying to sort of have an appreciation, a very sobering appreciation for the power of self-sabotage. In many cases, people die of self-sabotage. The choice is theirs, but they sabotage their life away, literally. The people who get the wake-up call, that's really, it's inspiring, it's hopeful. And you know what? I'm glad you brought it up because I hadn't really thought about it in that context before. I think of, my work as an NLP trainer and a coach is to facilitate that wake-up call through coaching and education. But let's say life intervenes and gives you a wake-up call. Let's say you go to the doctor and they go, okay, man, you got 5 years. If you don't clean this up, you could have 20.
Right.
Clean it up. And suddenly you're there, you're looking at your kids, you're looking at, I think what might happen, tell me what you think about that, is I'm in that situation and I look and I go, I'm literally killing myself.
Mm-hmm.
And no one is going to rescue me from this other than me. I can't blame anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And you sort of, I think what might happen is you see your self-sabotage.
Yeah.
And for the first time, because the stakes are so high, you're willing at that point to take responsibility for it. I mean, what do you think? Do you think that's...
I think, so I think that's it. I think when you said for the first time, you actually see the self-sabotage, I think that hit on it for me, at least the part that resonates with me, is that maybe it's not this big, gigantic, oh, now I've got everything in line. But for the first time, you actually see that it's you. And you see that you have, that you've been making this decision one way or the other, and that you have control of that decision. I think you hit on it right there. At least it sounds right to me, where you finally say, you know what, I don't have a choice but to do this other thing, because for too long I've been choosing the wrong thing.
Right.
And now I see that it's a choice, and I'm going to make a different choice now. And so to me, I think I like the way you phrase that. So for the first time, you actually see that you're self-sabotaging.
Yeah, because we have so many unconscious ways of denying the self-sabotage. And for me, another word for denying the self-sabotage is protecting it. It's like a precious gem that I'm going to stick away somewhere in a closet. I'm not going to let it go. I'm going to protect it. But denying the self-sabotage, we blame other people, blame life circumstances. We could even blame ourselves in a funny kind of way that we avoid actually taking responsibility. I say, I'm just broken.
Yeah.
It's how I am. And, created this way. And it's like, that's not taking responsibility. That's another form of blame that keeps you from looking at your self-sabotage.
Yeah.
But when, somebody just slaps you across the face with a, hey, you're going to die soon diagnosis if you don't clean it up, that can pop you out of it. Again, it doesn't pop everybody out of it. Sometimes we're just so committed to the self-sabotage that we take it to the grave. But some people wake up.
Yeah.
And I think seeing the self-sabotage, it's got to be part of it. It's like, I've literally been doing this. What have I been doing?
Yeah.
It's like you come out of a cloud of denial, and then you're in a position to take responsibility, to have a choice. Because if you don't see the self-sabotage and understand the mechanism, and if you're not aware of it, then it's unconscious. It's outside your awareness. You cannot make a choice about something that you're unaware of. You can't make a choice.
Yeah. And I'm really glad actually that you brought up the other half about, and I won't say half because that sounds like I'm putting a number to it, but you
I don't know what it is, but
portion of people who don't make that choice. I guess with no evidence whatsoever that more people actually don't take that action, that more people continue with the self-sabotage than the people that actually heed the wake-up call and say, I'm going to do something about it. And so I'm a very optimistic person. I believe that everybody can do that, but I'm realistic too. I'm a engineer, undergrad, and then law school. So if anybody's looking at the facts and the details, and realistic as me. So I get that. There are so many people that are not taking advantage of that wake-up call, and it's important to know. It puts it in perspective, right? And I think it does a couple things. One, it gives me the ability to understand that what I'm doing may be different, and it's okay. That it's okay. It's different from what that person's doing, because I'm not self-sabotaging anymore. They might think I'm crazy that now that I'm making these different choices, but that's okay. I'm awake now. I can see it now. I don't need everyone else to see it in order for me to act on what I see. And I think I'm big on celebrating successes and getting that momentum and getting that little dopamine, little jolt of dopamine.
Yeah.
And so sometimes, it's good to pat yourself on the back and say, hey, everybody wouldn't have made this choice. And even though they saw it. And so I like that about it too, is that we can be realistic and say, hey, a lot of people wouldn't have done that. And you have taken that first step. You have acknowledged it. You're aware of it now. And now you can start taking that second step of making decisions based off of that awareness.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it does put you into maybe a different category. I mean, it's so funny because it's not funny, but it's interesting because, family systems, relationships are often built around patterns of self-sabotage. And so it's sort of like my way of self-sabotaging in a twisted way complements your way of self-sabotaging.
Yeah.
And so we have different, at the NLP Center, we've identified different patterns of self-sabotage. Some people are, sort of driven toward rejection, and they typically attract partners who reject them. And some people are, driven toward being controlled, powerlessness. And they typically attract controlling people into their lives. And so oftentimes you break your pattern of self-sabotage and you step out of it, you're no longer playing that game in your family.
Yeah.
And you often get a backlash. They want to draw you back in, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, now I have a challenge. I don't want to get drawn back in, but I love these people, and I got to figure out how to be in my family or in my marriage or with my friends in a way that fits in a different way. And, that's often possible. And there's actually sometimes it's not possible. It's but there are these consequences that come about. Changing your life is serious business. I mean, right? There's a lot
absolutely.
There's a lot at stake.
Yeah. And it's uncomfortable, and it forces you to have to be real with yourself. Right. And I'm sure the type of people you're dealing with and the level of training that you have, I'm sure you've seen the whole spectrum of people that jump into it and they love it, or people who get going and then they face what you're talking about, right? And I was Mike, I was cool with you. I was along for the ride with bettering my life, but not if I'm gonna lose my family, right? Not if they're gonna reject me. And now, I'm getting this pushback and I'm not feeling so good about these advances I'm making anymore, even though consciously I know it's good for me. But I can see what you're saying, how those patterns would pull me back in, and maybe I haven't developed that habit yet. Yeah.
Totally. It's interrelational self-sabotage.
Wow.
And when that happens, I'm like, yeah, it's for real. Let's talk about it, because your family expects you to be a certain way. You're not that way anymore.
Yeah.
And you got to find a new way to relate. And, that is very often possible.
Yes.
It's sort of like I got to retrain the people around me about who I am and what I will, participate in. And, it's not easy to do, but of course it's worth doing. It's worth learning. I like what you said a minute ago about you got to be real about it. Because to me, there's NLP, there's all the tools and techniques and everything, but the principle that makes overcoming self-sabotage work is being real about it. It is being honest. And so if I can look at my weight loss problem and I go, for 10 years I've been dieting, 10 years you look at my behavior, I don't want to lose weight. I mean, if you look at my behavior,
right,
my behavior were an expression of what I want at some deeper level. I clearly don't want to
Right.
And so if I don't want to lose weight, then I want to be overweight. So some part of me wants to be overweight, thinks that's a good thing or the right thing or the safe thing to do. And as I got to own that, how am I going to have any influence over that unconscious want if I don't own it?
Yeah.
If I don't make it conscious, right?
Right. And
that's the tool.
Yeah. And for me, and it might have been Isaac that introduced this to me. But I feel like it was before that. And Dr. Isaac is the guy that I talked about that introduced me to NLP. But
NLP, yeah.
But just even for me, making small word changes in what I would say, right? I joked a little bit that you could be talking about me with the weight. I have wildly successful periods and then wildly unsuccessful periods.
Yeah.
And although I have not stopped the self-sabotage enough to just stay on it, what I have done is at least been real with myself and acknowledge ownership of that choice. And so, I tell people a lot of times, like now I don't say, I didn't have time to exercise because I think that's kind of letting me off the hook and that's cheating a little bit. I'll make the small word change and say, I didn't make time to exercise because it was a choice. I decided whether it was to sleep in, whether it was to take a long lunch, whether it was to watch TV a little bit longer or jump on Facebook or whatever the case was. I decided that something else was more important to me than that for today. And I got to tell you that little bit of word change, I don't know if this works for anybody else, but it's enough guilt for me sometimes that it makes me say, all right, I got to make a different decision tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I made this choice. I can't do this tomorrow. And so let me make that different decision. And that gets me, that works sometimes. That gets me going and back into the correct pattern.
Yeah. That's definitely a step down that path. There's a couple other steps down that path that are really sobering, and then some people start to think are a little twisted. But I went through, like I said, I was next in line for diabetes and so forth, and I was, I lost 50 pounds not that long ago, and so there's two elements to it. There's the strategy, and then there's the 100% wanting to, right? And for quite a long time, I had that thing where I didn't really want to. And after we developed the AHA solution, which is our self-sabotage problem, what I started doing was saying, I was supposed to exercise today, but I didn't, sort of acknowledging it. And then I would say, because I want to be fat. And it hurt. To say it, but it was true. I was more comfortable being uncomfortable in my body. That was another thing. I would sort of look at some food I wasn't supposed to eat that I was kind of bent on eating anyways. And sometimes I couldn't stop myself, and I would say, I'm going to eat this because it will keep me overweight, and I'm more comfortable being uncomfortable in my body.
Wow.
And it's like, it stops you. It's very sobering. Some people think it's a little twisted, but it's not an affirmation.
Right. It's definitely not an affirmation.
It's definitely not an affirmation. It's a truth shall set you free.
Yeah.
It's like, I call it a personal truth statement sometimes. It's just pure honesty about, what's going on. After a few months of that kind of brutal honesty, I got to a point where I went, how long am I going to want to be uncomfortable in my body at a deep level?
Right.
Do I have to? What would happen if I learned to tolerate being slender and healthy and having lots of energy and no excuses, right? And slowly that came about. After I made that shift, 55 pounds just came off in a few months.
Wow.
So, you're right. You got to get real. And there's ways to get real that are like ways that, information that you never considered before.
Right.
And it makes a big difference.
Mm. So part of you talked about like that aha, and you talked about the having the tools to make the change, but also that want, right? And I think when we talk about goals, a lot of times we tie that want to this thing called like purpose, right? We feel like it's our purpose, and because we want that so much, and I'm a believer in purpose, but I believe that sometimes our purpose changes.
Yeah.
I don't believe it's this one set thing. I think sometimes it's right under your nose. I don't want people to sit there and do nothing because they feel like they haven't figured out what their purpose is.
What their big giant purpose
Right.
for their whole life.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, there's different purposes at different stages.
Yeah. And so I'd like to just know a little bit before we kind of start wrapping up. I'd like to know a little bit more about you. In looking at your story, it was awesome to see the obstacles you faced and overcame. On your site, you talk about the fact that you're flexible, and you kind of give the argument about about why you're flexible. I thought that was awesome, by the way. And it included, not finishing college, right? I mean, I think you were at Brigham Young. Is that correct?
Yeah. And leaving the Mormon church and,
right. Yeah.
and all of that. Yeah, I was raised as a Mormon. I did the Mormon missionary thing in Brazil for 2 years, and went to BYU and stayed in as a devout member with hidden doubts, but a devout member of the Mormon church until I was 37. And at 37, I completely reframed my entire life based on a decision that I was going to find out for myself and determine what I wanted to do with my life. And if that church was true, then I was going to not just accept the indoctrination I got being raised, but I was going to find out for myself. And I ultimately decided that it wasn't.
Right.
So whole entire life thrown into chaos. But it taught me something really, really profound, which is even your core beliefs that make up who you are, you can change. The beliefs that seem so true that they're or the ways you have of being that seem so just who you are, and I could never be other than this, even those things can change.
Right.
And it's not simple or easy, and there's no magic trick for that. But even our very sense of who we are can change, and our whole life can just revolutionize around that change. I've been through that. So that was, 38, 37. Honestly, I thought I would be cursed and probably destroyed in the years that followed leaving the church. But actually, I've never been more successful and happy and so forth. But
right.
Yeah. So that's part of my story.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that, because people face all types of different obstacles, and they're looking for purpose. And it's what I can tell talking to you and listening to you on other shows, how much you care about what you're doing. And I don't know this for sure, but I can imagine there were points in your life where you're thinking, what am I doing, right? You talked about the upheaval as you started to make different decisions and change your life completely. I imagine there are people that are listening that might still be in the midst of that. And it's good to see that you can come out on the other end, that you can make choices and decisions that lead you to whatever those decisions are, finding what makes you happy, right? What works for you and what makes you successful.
Yeah, there's a piece of, if you're going through some sort of core change, you're changing to something better, but it's a rocky path. I mean, when I gave up all of my core beliefs about life and what it is and who we are and where we came from and our purpose, there wasn't anything to replace those with that I could just grab off a shelf, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I went into this sort of existential depression that lasted a couple of years.
Wow.
And it's like, I almost didn't know how to make a decision. My whole mechanism for knowing what to do with my life and day to day was gone. And it took a while to figure out who I am and how I'm going to live and what my values are and so forth. So it's no picnic, that's for sure. If going through kind of a really core transformation, there's parts of it that are really difficult, and but you can get through it. You can get through it. You keep going and you take responsibility for the process, and you learn patience. I learned patience when my existential depression just didn't go away.
Yeah.
I learned to be patient in that. So yeah, it's an adventure, that's for sure.
Yeah. And so Mike, we're at that point where we got to start winding down, and we're going to do something I call the hot seat scenario. And I'm going to talk about two people who are maybe at that point you're talking about, where they got to make some changes, or they're thinking about making some changes. I'm going to ask you to pick one of the two people and then tell us to swap lives with, and then just tell us a couple quick steps to get them pointed in the right direction. And so here we go. We got person A. Person A is somebody who works, let's just say, 40 to 50 hours a week, is living check to check, and really living check to check, but spends an average of 2 to 3 hours a night, surfing the internet, watching TV, just doing something mindless to wind down, and then starts the next day all over again. Then we've got person B. Person B is somebody who's making several $100,000 a year, whatever number we want that to be, to know that they're perfectly well off, they're fine, they've got enough money. But person B works crazy long hours for his company. I mean, basically, he really does feel like he wakes up, goes to work, finds some time sometimes in there to eat, comes home, sleeps, and does it all again. Now, neither one of these people feel like, actually, they know they're not living the life that they're supposed to be living. They're not pointed in the direction of their purpose. They're not passionate about what they're doing, and they're ready to change. So, Mike, which one of these two people are you going to swap lives with? And what are a couple quick steps to just get the ship starting to turn the other direction?
So with person B, plenty of money, but just maxed out in terms of time. I assume that this person is saying, I'm just so tied to my work, I don't have time to live a balanced life, or I don't have time to, right? But in both cases, I would probably start here. You're lying to yourself about what you think the obstacle is. And by the way, when people come to coach with me, I don't just lay that one on them. I'm just sort of, right
off the bat.
Hey, welcome to coaching. You're lying to yourself. But you're lying to yourself about what you think the obstacle is. You tell yourself you don't have time to do these things that would be fulfilling. No. That's a complete lie. The moment you really want to do those fulfilling things, you'll make time for them. You'll rearrange your schedule. You'll delegate. These are all principles that you already know. You're a smart person. You know that you can delegate, rearrange your schedule, say no to this, say no to that. You know how you can cut back and free up time for yourself. You're not dumb. You're just fooling yourself.
Right. That
time is the reason you can't do more to be happy. The real reason is, the truth is, you have the opportunity to be happy, to live a more balanced life. You don't want it bad enough. You have a part of you that is so used to what I would call self-deprivation, living this crazy life, but feeling empty on the inside. that the idea of just being filled with joy probably seems so foreign to you. It's like, I'm so happy and connected to other people, and that whole thing probably seems like, you know what, that's other people.
Yeah.
That's not me.
Yeah.
I'm the guy who's empty on the inside.
Mm.
Your attachment to that inner emptiness, that's what you're holding on to. That's the problem. It's got nothing to do with time. Time is your excuse, saying I don't have time to do these fulfilling things. That's the way you protect your inner emptiness and hold on to it.
Wow.
And that's where, that would be step one. And that's where we would start from. And in my coaching with rapport, and I give lots of education, I'm very patient, but in a certain way, I require people to see these kinds of things about themselves. And if you're not ready to see these kinds of things about yourself, then, you know, I'm probably not your coach.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who are ready to see these kinds of things about themselves. So anyways, there's my answer. That's a great little scenario. Great little test.
Thank you. And I love that you played along with me for the scenario. I love getting the different answers, and that was a good one. I mean, that's a simple but difficult to deal with answer, right? You're lying to yourself. That's not an easy thing to hear or deal with.
No.
But it's a simple truth. And so I appreciate that. And so before we wrap up here, Mike, I just want to say thank you again for sharing with our friends and family, teaching them a little, you know, maybe for some of them giving a little introduction into NLP, and for other people, maybe a little more. Maybe they've been introduced to it, and so now they know a little bit more about how people use it, how you use it when you coach. What I'd love to do to wrap this up is two things. I'd love for you to give us a quote or a mantra that you use, whether it's something you happen to be using right now, or whether it's an old favorite of yours you use whenever you get, you know, you need that little extra something. And then please, please, please follow that up with your contact information where people can find out more about you, find out more about NLP. I'm sure that people that are listening to this podcast have kind of connected with some of that stuff you talked about, right? Some people may be a little offended that you told me I'm lying to myself and I'm making these bad decisions. But I think there are a lot of people out there, like you said, who are saying, yeah, he's got a point. And
he's got a point.
He's got a point. And I want to reach out to him and see if maybe he's a good fit to coach me. So let's end this with your quote or mantra, and then how we can get in touch with you.
My quote comes, it's sort of a maxim that actually comes from, I learned it from an engineer.
Oh, okay.
I assume it's big in the engineering world, but the quote is, a well-defined problem seeks its own solution. And I believe that with all my heart. If you have a problem and your awareness of the problem is not helping in any way, shape, or form, chances are very high that you have not defined your problem well. Because as soon as you get what the problem is, problem solving is a primal skill. As human beings, we're natural problem solvers. We've got to solve problems to survive. Our mind is constantly trying to solve problems. And we don't even have to work in order for our mind to start generating ideas. A well-defined problem seeks its own solution.
I like that.
Define your problem well. So, and then my information, if you, that's what I'm doing now. How do people? Okay. So our website is inlpcenter.org. Our primary purpose is training and certifying NLP practitioners. We get people from all over, from, you know, life coaches, mental health counselors, business people, and probably a third of the people are those just interested in personal development, learning the communication skills and so forth. I also wrote a book called Your Achilles Heel. And it is about this topic of self-sabotage. It's on Amazon. You can go and look for Your Achilles Heel on Amazon. It's a Kindle book. It's about a 20-minute read. I think it's actually 99 cents right now, something like that. So it just as an introduction to the topic. So.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mike. And friends and family, you know that we're going to have links in the description of this episode directly to his website, and I'll add a link in there for the book as well. So if you want to get in touch with him, you can just scroll down and click the link. If you're listening and you're not at a place where you can do that, it'll be there for you later, or he said it and you can just pull it up. So Mike, thank you so much again for sharing with us. I appreciate it. And friends and family, thank you for joining us again for another episode of Live the Goals podcast. Remember to set goals that matter and live the goals you set.
Thanks for checking out the show today, and make sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. We hope you take away something that helps fill your life with purpose and laughter. And make sure you head over to livethegoals.com for more info on guests and resources. Remember to set and reach goals that lead you to a life of purpose and passion.